Hello.
Hello. What order do we want to introduce ourselves in?
Alphabetical.
So that means
Someone else can decide this.
alphabetical it is.
Alphabetical it is. Hi, folks. I think I go first. Hi, my name is Ajay. I use he, him pronouns. My Twitter is at Ajay Pandey. Let's pass it down.
Hey, I'm Bashir Gauss. I use he, him pronouns, and my Twitter is at Bashir Gauss.
A, B, C, D, E.
It's you, Jay.
Okay, hi. I'm Jay, and I don't know my alphabet. My pronouns are they, them, and my Twitter is at Nala Woo, Nala, like the Lion King, Woo, W-U.
Hello, my name is Riley Gritch, Gryc, and you can find me on Twitter at Riley Gritch. That's Riley, Riley Gryc. And welcome to the Play-By-Post Role-Playing Handbook CouchCon 2020 panel. Saturday.
Hi, folks. Our handles are also in the little bottom overlay. So yes, we should talk a little bit about what play-by-post role-playing games are. Bashir, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, sure. So, play-by-post role-playing is text role-playing over various internet mediums. The most common one is probably Discord. You also have forum games. For the purposes of this panel, we're basically talking about three types. Synchronous role-playing, generally over Discord or an IRC client or something like that, which is where you all get together at a scheduled time, like an in-person role-playing game. You role-play for your scheduled period of time, and then the session's over. We have asynchronous role-playing games, which are where the game is basically always on and people are posting whenever they have time, which is, and also generally on Discord or IRC or other text messaging services, or other text services. And then forum role playing, which is like asynchronous, but even longer over time and on internet forums like Something Awful or Sufficient Velocity or eRepublic.
Also, remember to check out the charity and virtual vendor halls. All donations are going, I believe, to Doctors Without Borders.
Yes, they are.
And on the virtual vendor hall, which I believe Nightbot will post periodically, check out some of the awesome artists that are hosted there, including Jay. I think you're on there.
I am there.
But yeah, that's play-by-post. It's one of those things that I feel like a lot of people are interested in, but a lot of the how do you do it stuff is like not super common yet.
It's not clear, really, because there's not many people doing it nowadays, at least that I've seen.
Yeah.
But that's what we're here to talk about.
That's what we're here to talk about.
Because us four, we do it.
But yeah, let's get into some of the challenges, because I think it's good to like do some myth busting, as it were.
Myth busting.
And like get people's expectations in line, because it's in practice, play-by-post isn't what you think it is. Jay, do you want to go first?
Sure. There's a bunch of different challenges that we've sort of outlined as far as what makes play-by-post games challenging to run. One of the biggest ones is obviously the lack of face-to-face interactions, since everything is typed out. People might also see that as a positive thing, especially now when we are all separated and staying inside.
Wash your hands, by the way.
Yes, please wash your hands. And so it just depends on like the type of person you are, but definitely the lack of face-to-face interaction also means that you can't use like physical props. Like if I was going to be GMing something, I might have, say, I don't know, like a map or something to give the players, and over Play-By-Post there is no physical handing props out to people. Maps would, like, you can do it by posting like pictures, and we'll talk about how to sort of set up your server to do that later. But like, yeah, so you can't hand out props and that sort of thing. Also, again, with the lack of the face to face, you can't really see people's body language. There's no like role playing out loud. All of your role playing is done through text. And so instead of, if your character, say, is really excited about something, you can't just say your lines or whatever you want to say excitedly. You have to type that in, like so and so says blankety blank. Their body language, like, you have to explain and write it all out.
And
Which,
I think, yeah, if you don't mind,
yeah, of course.
I think another big issue that sort of is compounded by that is one that is of momentum. You know, like you have to do a lot of work to upkeep a play-by-post role playing. One of the things that we were talking about yesterday when we sort of did our pre-game pre-panel is that, you know, in in-person games, if you split the party, or if you have people who go off and do their own thing, that can be challenging for some game masters and facilitators. But if it's online and if it's completely text-based, you know, you might have somebody go off and do their own thing, and then everyone's waiting on them to write out that thing. And it can really be a strong momentum killer. A lot of people have this conception that play-by-post role-playing, doing so writing, is more for a passive actors and passive storytellers. And it really requires a more active presence to be completely involved and to make sure that you're on top of things and to make sure that that momentum isn't really killed.
Yeah, speed is a huge issue in play-by-post gaming. One of the consequences of the challenges mentioned before is that things take a lot longer while you're trying to decide on wording and how to convey things. And so that really affects what sort of games are easy to run. And in the case of, say, Dread, where you're relying on a physical Jenga tower, even what sort of games are possible to run, which is something we're going to talk about later in more detail. Additionally, it also means that players who are relatively passive or quiet risk being left behind and not getting screen time in a pretty big way, since a lot of the nonverbal communication or more passive contributions they might provide aren't as visible in a text-based medium.
Speaking of being left behind, what happened to Jay?
Oh
Computer
no!
froze up.
We appear to have a technical issue. Hopefully, that will be solved shortly.
They
Yeah.
may need to reboot. We'll keep you posted on that one. Also, like on that like risk of like having everyone be there at a relatively fast pace, like I often pitched it to people at first of like, you don't need to have a schedule. You don't need to set up a schedule to run a play-by-post, but that is not true. You end up getting these hot times. Like I'm in one game where everyone's in the chat between like 5 and 11 or 7 and 11 at night. And that kind of organically comes up. You end up learning like when people clock out of work, when people have lunch, what time zone people are in. That actually all matters more than you would think at first.
Very much so.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
most of my games are synchronous on Discord. So we have session times. And so you actually have all the scheduling problems you would in an in-person game, just occasionally worse, because like the Lancer game I run, we've got a player in Australia, a player in Germany, and a player in France. And so that means that our available time to run that game is extremely limited because we're running across like 16 hours of time zone differences all the time.
Very much so. And I think another consequence of that is that, you know, with the lack of body language, with the lack of sort of being in person, and with the challenges surrounding making sure that everybody's on board, things have a tendency to compound exponentially very quickly. And so for the facilitators of games, like, you have to be very aware that any small issue has the propensity to very quickly snowball out of control. Hey, Jay.
Hello.
You're back.
You're
we
back.
haven't lost you forever.
My computer just died. I don't know what happened.
How exciting. So we're still talking about the challenges of role-playing online, and one of the things that you had brought up yesterday was somewhat that it can be difficult to overcome some ableist issues. Did you want to speak about that, Jay?
Yeah. So I missed like a good, like, I don't know, 3 minutes.
It's okay.
But yeah, so I'm running a game of Dungeons and Dragons via Play-By-Post over Discord. And one of my players, who's actually a really good friend of mine, and we're also actually roommates too, but they have a lot of chronic pain, and they deal with chronic migraines, which makes them unable to be staring at screens for long periods of time. And so their posts are not super frequent. And often the game, just by its design, will sort of leave them and their character behind. And the reason I say it's ableist is because this style of game really favors people who can dedicate time into sitting at your computer or sitting at your tablet or whatever, your phone, typing things out. And so they need my web caption thing.
Let us quickly get back up to speed. Jay, do you want to actually take over talking?
Sure. Yeah, like, it requires that players are on the ball with some frequency, and it could be something like chronic pain. It could also be, oh no, I work 12-hour days all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden you have one player who either is getting left behind or is now the bottleneck for the whole game. And like, that's a challenge that I don't think any of us have the answer to fully yet.
Yeah.
And I think we should start pushing forward, but I think the last thing we should also like point out is we don't have the answers either. This is still a very new thing. We don't have all the answers about how to adapt safety tools for Play-By-Post. We don't have all the answers about how to address how characters interrupt each other, or how consent between characters, like, how do you go about this character is going to put their hand on your character's shoulder. Like, there are ways to address it, but there aren't any standard practices or best practices quite yet. And that's just a fact of this format not being super common yet.
Yep. And I think transitioning from sort of, so we've talked a lot about the challenges that Play-By-Post role-playing presents. And so coming to a panel where we tell you that it's a good format, you might be wondering, why should I do it? If there's
Why should I do this, Riley?
Why should we do this?
Why are we here?
Why are humans existent? Welcome.
To Real Philosophy Hours.
No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to get that existential. Let's start by addressing some of the strengths of Play-By-Post role-playing with issues of consent. One of the classic ways that was dealt with it, I used to do a lot of forum-based role-playing. And so people would have out-of-character threads that had a list of rules. And one of the most common rules was something called no god modding. And so to gamers, god modding means being able to do anything everywhere. But in Play-By-Post role-playing, that has a little different connotation. It means do not take control of someone else's character. You don't get to dictate their reactions. You merely get to dictate your actions. So, for instance, I would go, my character, Riley, reaches out to place a hand on Bashir's shoulder. And I don't get to dictate whether my hand lands. Bashir gets to. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the edit function in wherever it's available helps a lot with that, because if a line does get crossed, it's easy to just go, hey, let's edit that out. Let's change that back.
And that's another benefit of play-by-post role-playing. Like, you can have those slower, hey, we need to slow up and stop and address this specific point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just the slowness, as much as it works against it, is also one of its greatest strengths, because you have a lot more time to discuss things when things get heated or are a problem in the moment. You generally have at the least a few minutes to think about it, and at most you could spend hours figuring out, like, how do I want to react to this? Am I okay with this? Is this something I want in the game? Or is this an issue I want to bring up?
Definitely, that's one of my favorite things about Play-by-Post, is that as someone who loves creative writing and writing prose, that's basically what Play-by-Post ends up being, because theoretically, after your game is all done, you can scroll all the way back to the top and read the whole thing as if it were a novel.
It is my favorite thing.
It's so nice. But what I like about that is that I get to go into way more detail about my characters. I can describe what they're wearing. I can describe their facial expressions in ways that, if I was sitting at a table playing a game, these are details that maybe will just go over the heads of my fellow players or aren't going to be as focused on. Because, like, I can act out like an eyebrow raise or like a lip, like a whatever this is called, like your mouth, your face twitching, but
The anime anger thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But in a play-by-post, you can write, I mean, don't do this, but you can write paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs about how the face looks. And in a way, you're drawing attention to those details and thus can create narrative that way, which is really cool.
Also, it ends up that characters end up being a lot wittier and a lot much more able to say sharp things, because you have literal
comebacks.
perfect recall of everything that's happened. So you get a lot more capacity to have a sense of what has happened, react to it more. And that thing where you wake up the next day and you're like, I wish I had said that. In Play-by-Post, you can literally sleep on a question, and come back the next day and immediately come up with the witty response that calls back to something 2 arcs ago. And this kind of goes a little bit further, this makes it really good for mystery games and games where you have to interrogate people, or where you have to come up with really, really witty lines, because you just have perfect recall and time to think about what your characters say and do.
You can have good quips, all the good quips.
So many good quips. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest strengths. I think, personally, I feel like the emotional distance really helps me with playing a more fleshed out or more interesting character. And as a DM, it widens the types of NPCs I'm comfortable playing and can do easily and relatively quickly, significantly, because I don't have to do these reactions and thoughts in the moment. I can plan out what this character needs to say, and it doesn't hurt the pace of the game as it might in person.
Yeah.
Which helps a lot with intricate stuff. And private messaging and private channels are very possibly
very good.
The coolest feature that you cannot get in person in a reasonable way.
Yeah, because with in-person role-playing, you have to be like, all right, Sharon, come over here while everybody just sort of sits and I'll detail you the dream sequence. No, in private role-playing, you can just be like, yeah, I'm going to send you a DM and it's going to have everything that goes on. Now you know. Cool.
Now you know.
Now you know. And the
The
flow.
more you know.
The more you know. and the flow hasn't been broken at all. It's just that seamless and easily integrated with it. What are some of the other
Play-By-Post
strengths?
Oh, so yeah,
go
I
on.
was just also going to say for people who don't feel as strong with improv, this is also a great tool to get better
Yeah.
because again, you're not being forced to come up with something on the fly. You have time to sit and think and type and revise and backspace and perfect your response before sending it out. And so I know definitely a big draw for this is people who aren't as good as aren't as good at in-person face-to-face role playing because this lets them think about things, which in a real-time game, if you were to sit there and think about what you were saying, it kind of drags the game a bit. But here, as we all said, no drag.
Also, the emotion. Go ahead.
No, go.
Also, the emotional distance helps for a lot of like very, very like more emotionally tense scenes. Like, I am much better at running romance scenes in a play-by-post because that way I can write flirty lines and not have it be weird because I'm not looking at that person straight in the eye and saying
Hey,
like,
baby, you want to go for a dip at the pond?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I have never run an in-person romance scene. I have run stuff online.
That's fair.
You all know you want to do a romance scene with me.
Oh.
Hey, baby, let me whisper in your ear.
Oh, good. So, a question I had wanted to ask.
Oh.
Dab on him.
Mhm.
We didn't really cover it in our pregame, but I feel like it's kind of important to cover now, and we've got a little time left to do so. What do each of you love about play-by-post role-playing? Like, what got you into it? Do you want to go for? Go ahead.
Me?
Okay, so
Yeah, you go.
the people you can play with online it's an incredible variety that you're not going to be able to meet in person. I am currently playing with on a weekly basis a friend in Australia and a friend in Germany and a couple in like Texas and the East Coast and England, and that's something that I couldn't do in person. Like no one's getting those plane flights on a weekly basis to play Lancer for 4 hours.
Just like Doctors with No Borders, Play-by-Post knows no borders.
Wow.
Anyway,
Jay, what
sorry,
about you?
continue.
for me,
Yeah.
you go, Jay.
Me? Okay.
Whichever, Jay.
The Jay and a Jay.
The
Yeah.
Jay. Anyways, so for me, this all started back when I was 12.
You have
I
30
would do-
seconds. I'm kidding.
Yes. So basically I did forum role playing when I was 12 on Fiction Press, which is a relic. And it was very problematic, the stuff that we were doing. Like I look back on it now, it's super cringy. But I Bashir, I was able to meet so many incredible people from everywhere, and I felt really great connections to these people. One of these people, her name's Devin. She was she was my first online friend, and we're still in touch now. So we've known each other since we were 12. So that's what, 8 years? Because I'm baby, I'm 20. Anyway, but yeah, like it allowed me to foster these really great connections. But I role played on Fiction Press until like all throughout middle school, and then I was doing stuff through Skype chats, just role playing back and forth with 1 or 2 people. And then I kind of took a break from it because I thought I was too old for role playing, which is what I was calling it, and I didn't know like that there was another term for it. And then once I started playing tabletop roleplay games, I started hearing about this thing called Play-by-Post, and I got interested in it. And then it all started back up again, and now I'm in so deep.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Um, Riley, you want to go?
No, you go ahead.
For me, the part that I really like is that it's actually, if I'm usually the GM, but it allows me to be a lot more flexible, both with myself and with the players. Of, if someone is just swamped that Thursday night, that doesn't sink the game for 2 weeks.
Mm.
It's just okay. We'll put the game on ice for 3 days or 2 weeks and just roll with it. Or depending on the game, you can still have vignettes on the side. Like there's a lot of flexibility in how you want to run the game, and if you're smart about it, you can do a lot to improve the flexibility for people who can't commit to blocking out 2-3 hours every Saturday night.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think for me, it's meeting new people, having that flexibility, and being able to write expressively. That really
Yes.
grounded my love. It's having a medium to do that in is very powerful. And so I sort of want to transition over to what games and systems particularly support play-by-post role-playing.
What games should I play?
What should we play? Yeah, so if we want to
As-
do that rundown.
As someone running Dungeons and Dragons, don't do Dungeons and Dragons. It's really hard. Mainly because of combat, because combat takes forever.
Well, I think that's our next topic. We're on so for games that work well, powered by the apocalypse games, anything
Yes.
that has
Yeah.
reasonably quick resolution of actions is probably going to work okay. And so you have like powered by the apocalypse, to a degree FFG and Genesis.
Mhm.
I
That's
believe
mostly for the dice bot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think so this is a decent place to talk about dice bots, or do you want to handle dice bots here or in a later section?
Let's handle them
Let's
here.
handle it now.
All right. So Aji, you had a dice bot you wanted to mention. I've got one I'll mention afterwards.
And I have one too.
The primary reason I suggested putting the Star Wars FFG and Genesis games, which have a weird dice system, as games that work well for play-by-post, is because the dice bot that that system comes with, or someone has made for that system, called D1C3, is just absolutely incredible. And that dice bot is so good that it facilitates online play.
Yeah. It's an example of a tool that allows a seemingly unapproachable game to really be accessible because of how thorough the command structure is and
how well it works.
How absolutely well it works. Yeah, truly. And what was your dice bot, Jay?
So Fernbot, which is a all-purpose dice bot that I use and that's used on quite a few servers that I'm on, which is kind of an all-in-one dice bot, image bot, that it can do FFG and Genesis. It's mostly used for other dice, so whatever you're running, it can probably help facilitate your game and provide in-jokes and a degree of reaction that are a lot of fun and useful if that's what you're looking for in a bot. Other bots can be tailored for whatever it is you're running, but they're an enormous aid to online play because they handle a lot of the background stuff that's kind of difficult to do online in a pretty accessible way, which we'll get into more on best practices. Does anyone else have anything to say on dice bots, or should we talk about mystery and survival
I had
horror?
one just really quickly, but it's called Avrae, AVRAE, I think. I can't spell things out loud.
Yeah.
But Avrae is specifically, I think it was specifically made for D&D because with this bot, not only will it roll the dice for you, but you can also look up spells, you can look up abilities, it will generate random characters for you, it can do it can generate stats for you, etc., etc. It's really great, like even if like just for people who have had their in-person D&D games go online, it's a great bot to use for online dice rolling for that game. But like I said, for the reasons I stated earlier, D&D is not great.
So let's talk about why.
Let's talk about why.
All right. Mainly, the main reason why is because of the combat. Because Dungeons and Dragons, the way that combat is designed, it's turn-based combat, and basically, due to the nature of play-by-post, if you're waiting on like one person to take their turn, that just slows everything down. And it can get really boring just waiting for each person to take their turn in combat. And again, because combat in D&D is only 6 seconds, and combat in in-person games already takes a long time, but in play-by-post it's even longer, like a month.
So, like, for
Yeah.
reference, in terms of like time scaling, like if you wanted to fit a session's worth of an RPG into a play-by-post, it'll take 2 to 3 weeks if everyone's going quick, or 2 to 3 months if people are taking things a little slowly. So imagine that for combat, and all of a sudden you're
Oof.
burning like 2 months on a single fight.
Yep.
Um,
Just to sort of counterpoint that, the systems that really succeed in play-by-post are a little softer mechanically.
Not as
They're the
rules
ones,
heavy.
yeah, not as role heavy, not as mechanics heavy. They're more lyrically developed. They're more expressive. So the ones that are really dice mechanic-y heavy, like
GURPS.
D&D,
GURPS.
and yep,
GURPS.
those all get weighed down pretty significantly.
Pathfinder, more like Math Finder.
Yes.
But
And did
yeah,
you want to bring up Dread and Starcrossed?
yeah. So Dread and Starcrossed and other games that need physical props suffer a lot online because you can't really play Jenga online. There are kind of workarounds for it on like online Jenga games, and even those don't have the tactile feeling and that playing Jenga in person does. So you lose an enormous amount of the feel of the game. There are workarounds people have done, using dice, and like whenever you get a given number, bad things happen, or whenever you get a given combination. So double ones on 2d6 roughly translates to when the tower topples in Jenga. It happens roughly every 36 pulls, versus roughly every 36 rolls for 2d6. But you still lose a lot of the feeling of the game and how the game works in the translation. Anything with crunchy combat, like to a degree, even the FFG games can get into this if you get into a big long
Yeah.
combat. And some of it's down to which format you're using. So for synchronous play-by-post games where you're coming on for a session time, combat's still a problem, but it's less of one. My general rule of thumb is double your time budget for anything you're hoping to do.
Or half the size of your combat encounter. Have it be a
Yeah.
fight with 2 people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's move on to games that really can only just work online. And to that,
Nation gaming.
Nation
the wonderful
gaming.
world of nation gaming. If you want to know what nation gaming is, it's basically like if you started role-playing a game of Risk, or if you were your Civilization and you're acting out as either George Washington or a soldier or a farmer, the amount of effort that people go into putting role-playing stuff into these nation games is extreme in a degree I don't think anybody quite understands.
Like EVE Online levels of commitment?
Like
Yeah.
EVE Online levels of commitment.
Straight up, it is a genuinely monumental undertaking for many of these nation games. It's like hours of historical research and planning and like negotiation between players, and it relies a lot on things like the private messaging function of online role playing, on things like the ability to go through written records in forum role play-by-post gaming, and all of the types of gameplay that online gaming enables, to the point where it doesn't really have much of an in-person equivalent, save perhaps like those 40-person mega games that pop up periodically.
Yeah, I think the closest equivocation we get is kind of LARPing. Like those big games can sometimes feel nation gamey because of the different roles. But just, yeah, the amount of nitty gritty details and privacy and in-game stuff that is needed to sort of necessitate the meta narrative of nation gaming really can't be done offline in any sort of feasible way that doesn't seem like you've lost your complete shit.
Should we move into like structuring a Discord channel, that whole shebang?
Yeah, let's
We
talk
should-
about best practices.
Let's
Okay.
summarize them because we're still working on a text version of these best practices that would really get into the details.
We
Yes.
are.
We
Yes.
are.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we're gonna. That's still a work in progress. But the big things to focus on are one. Your thing should have multiple channels for both in character and out of character. Have a dedicated channel for safety tools.
I
Have
pulled
one
up
for
my
memes.
thing, actually. If
Yeah, go through the
just
quick
right
categories.
here. Yeah, okay. So this is my Discord. This is my aforementioned Dungeons and Dragons game that I'm running over Discord. And basically how I've set up the channels here. I've got an information category that has announcements, introductions for people to introduce themselves, the game rules / and that's also where I put my homebrew rules and house rules. Game summary is for spectators because I invited non-players to just come in and watch the game, basically read it. I have a session 0 channel where I put everybody's lines and veils to make sure that we're all on the same page for that, and also for the spectators so they can know what to expect. Moving down, I have a section for the lore of my setting. That's mainly just for me to info dump stuff for the players to reference and then work into their characters. And then I have a section for characters where I have character creation, discussion, the character introductions so that anyone reading it can see who all the characters are. And then this is D&D specific, but I have character sheets and a character log where me, the DM, I keep track of everybody's characters. And then I have an NPCs Met channel where I just put down names of the NPCs as people meet them. The most important one is the table, which is the good meat of the actual role playing. There's the main role play threads, and then as people split the party, there's sub threads so I can have several scenes going on at the same time to try and engage everybody. And then further down, we have the chat channels. So there's a players only category, so the players can talk amongst themselves about the game. But then again, because my game is a public game, there are chat channels for all the spectators to discuss the game. There's memes, selfies, pets, etc., etc.
I personally think the second most important channel after the safety tools is the meme channel.
Yeah.
Because that's how you get everyone to go from "Hi, I know you from this game" to "Hi, we're all friends."
Yes, exactly.
It's the meme channel. Get the
and
in-jokes
also
in.
as a game master, when people start memeing your game, you know you succeeded.
Yes. Yes.
But lastly, another really, this is again like a play-by-post only thing we talked about, is my secrets channels. I gave each player their own channel that only they can see. And so if I need to tell them something secretly, we go in there. Or if it's a like a one-on-one scene, we go in there and we do that. And that's basically how I set mine up. Mine is
yeah.
different, I guess, from other play-by-posts just because we're allowing spectators,
which is something that can be done and is
Exactly.
a strength of this medium. You can
Yeah.
have people spectate things.
It's kind of like a live show for any other tabletop game where you have an audience watching you play. But in this one, instead of having people just sitting in seats, they're just reading and lurking and memeing your games.
Yep.
Also,
Bring us home. Yeah.
yeah. Also, a lot of the structuring of your setup with your Discord forum, design it so that you can do what Jay and I were talking about of being able to just scroll up to the beginning or scroll up to a certain milestone mark and just read it out. So like have like instead of sessions, have some kind of like arc or scene structure with like a bookmark for the beginning of each one.
Yeah, you can
So you
pin
can
them so people can go to it easily.
Exactly, and then just keep going back.
Or keywords.
Or
Because
keywords.
Discord has a search function. You know what you can't do in in-person games? Search.
And this is why mystery games work so well, because you can have a notes thing with search.
Ooh.
Or also like, and I think the big one is like, know how to specifically call out players and use that as a way to make sure nobody gets left behind.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
the big one.
Absolutely.
Because if you can make sure that everyone in the game is included, this becomes a really, really engaging way for people to play on their own time.
Ask leading questions. That's a good thing.
Leading
try and bring someone
questions
in. Yeah.
are the meat
Yep.
of Play-By-Post. Or a lot of games, really.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that sort of concludes our panel, our presentation on your crash course to Play-By-Post role playing.
Your crash course.
In a world where play-by-post role-playing is given to you in a 45-minute crash course online.
So
But yeah.
please, we're all on chat. Like,
We have
ask some
15
questions.
minutes or so for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so shoot us some questions via chat, and we are ready for answers to be provided by ourselves. That was one of the weirdest structured sentences I have ever spoken.
I'm about to say something weirder, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it not
Okay.
as weird.
Okay.
One thing that to check in chat, Erica Explorers mentions Numenera as a
Ooh.
potential game for Play-By-Post. I've never played Numenera.
I like that idea. I haven't played Numenera either.
I
don't
also
know what
have
that
not
is.
played Numenera.
Let's all play
heard some
Numenera.
good
Let's
things
all
about
play
it,
some
but
Numenera.
I have not yet gotten the chance.
Fair. Just to state for the record, I cannot open Twitch because it will crash my computer. So
Maybe
Twitch
that's
right
what happened
here.
to me.
please, if anybody sees any questions, just read them out so that I
Yeah,
can.
so
Definitely.
far, no, but please give us any questions you might have.
In the
got-
meantime, we can kind of just like, I don't know, spitball about
Yeah.
I love
sweet tips and
spitballing.
tricks.
All right, should we
So
start-
one of the things I would recommend is if you have a forum-based game, having an attached Discord as well as an OOC thread can help a lot with getting people on the same page, trying to see what people's schedules are, what might be slowing things down, making sure everyone knows who you're waiting on a post from, just because for the out of character organization of the game, Discord is a lot faster than forum posts.
Yes. And also in terms of like pacing, very often the GM will end up setting that pace whether they wanted to or not. Like if the GM posts every 3 or 4 days, that's going to be the pace that all the players follow. If the GM is the kind of person who, like me, will respond at any time in the day because I have nothing better to do in my life, you will have your players
Hello.
start apologizing for not posting as fast as you are. So you have to be upfront about, here's the expectation. You can take 2 or 3 days before I ask, hey, are things going okay? Like, you have to set those expectations for posting pace.
Yeah, I always tell my players, like, your real life comes first. This
Your
is
real life
Yes.
comes first.
It's just a game. If you are gonna be gone for extended period of time for whatever reason, just all I ask is you let me know and we'll work around it. Because like Ajay, like I'm just like always on my phone. So I usually respond.
This thing is grafted to my skin.
That's
this
valid.
I answer within minutes.
Yeah.
But I let all my players know that they don't have to do that. And again, just the session zero expectations, communication, good stuff.
To lead into something else, if you allowed me. Another one of the strengths, and I sort of want to touch on a minor hot button topic in the TTRPG community.
Content warning.
Making sure that your characters are all online. There are fantastic online resources for safety and facilitating gameplay. Check those out. Things like the X card, things like, it's easy because of how slow, quote unquote, play-by-post role-playing can go. You can just take a moment in chat and be like, hey, we all good? Like literally, that it's as easy as that. You don't have to break your flow, break your stride. Just put it in a public channel and be like, we all good? Are we
We all good?
vibing this? Yeah.
And like
then, yeah.
for examples, check Kiana Shaw. They put together a like a 2-3 page handbook. Monty Cook Games has one on consent in particular.
I believe Laura also helped.
Yeah, Lauren did too.
Yes.
So there are options.
So
and
many
I'd say
options.
look at the ones you have, and adapt them as you see fit.
One of the options you also have in play-by-post gaming, especially forum play-by-post gaming, is to run a post or an update past the players who it affects before putting it public, just to make sure that this is something everyone's on board for.
Yeah, you can draft your replies and be like, yo, GM, is this good? And they can be like, yeah, or nah. And like, it's that simple.
Yeah.
One thing that Shina Obi put in the chat is one of the things that can really take out a forum play-by-post is just if everyone just is silent for a good amount of time. And a lot of that comes down to making sure the GM keeps an eye on that and checks on players, because you don't know if the person is silent for a week because like there could be any number of reasons, and it's worth at least checking and being empathetic about. Sometimes people just go AWOL for a week. It happens.
Yeah.
Ship blows up.
Ship blows up.
Ship blows up. I have a play-by-post that I started back in last year, The Depths Above. It's a survival horror role play.
Survival horror works great on play-by-post.
It works so good. And I have for the last 3 months been trying weekend after weekend to get to the place where I post again with it. And it at this point is completely stalled out because the world is happening. 2020 is raining down upon us. I discovered a corpse on Monday. Everything's great.
We should probably CW that.
Yeah, we should probably content warning that. Sorry about that, everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, life happens.
Life happens.
And real life should always come before the role play.
And also, even if the game is slow, if you are like, I'm speaking from the GM perspective here of like, if you have multiple of these games going, it's still going to be a low-key like drag on things you're doing because you're going to be keep thinking about the 2 or 3 or 4 games that you're running. I may have said too much about. I call myself Darth Play-by-Post because this is all I do with my life now.
That's fair.
But yeah, don't overextend yourself.
Yeah.
It may be a thing where there's no blocked out time on your schedule, but it's still time blocked out in your head. So pace yourself.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's one of my biggest weaknesses is that when I get into things, I just don't stop. And I have ADHD, so it's really hard for me to concentrate on things.
Same.
And so like just really quickly, for example, when Riley started The Depths Above, I signed on to help out with writing and stuff, and I ended up getting very deep. But anyways, I found it really hard to concentrate on my school stuff and all of that sort of thing because I'm just very bad at time management, and I don't realize how long I'm just sitting there. So that's definitely a precaution, I guess, if you start this. Watch your time and make sure that you are making time for the things that you need to be doing in your life, like your homework or your work or your laundry
Eating,
or
drinking.
eating. Yeah. Sleeping.
Shina Obi brings up like it's like they get a feeling of like it's hard to dedicate what feels like an appropriate amount of time.
Oh yeah.
And the way you address that is you be upfront about what an appropriate amount of time is. Of like say upfront. Good.
Yeah. Do you want to go a little bit more into depth on that, Bashir?
So for forum play-by-post in particular, you can spend an enormous amount of time drafting a reply or second guessing yourself, even on one game, never mind 2 or 3. And when you get to several, it can feel like you're not putting out that much content, or that the content you're putting out is pretty spaced out, but there can be a lot of work going into that content, or content can be kind of can eat up more time than you think it is pretty quickly, especially if you're running things and there's a lot of preparation and planning going into stuff. And if something doesn't pan out, that can then be devastating, which can be genuinely really unpleasant if just something kind of crashes and burns from a lack of planning or from a relative lack of activity on because people were overloaded. Putting in like this is how much time I have to work on things helps, but to some degree the issue can be when other people don't put in things, or when you're in something and it explodes, that can affect you well after the thing actually ended.
Yes. And especially if you're like playing out an emotional scene. Like I remember I like basically role played out a conversation about masculinity and how you don't always learn how to apologize and how that ruins you. And because it's play by post, that one conversation ended up getting stretched out over 3 hours. And I was just emotionally raw for the rest of the day. And it was great. But also that's a thing you have to keep in mind, is that like, if you're checking on a play by post game and it's very, very emotionally intense, that one conversation that would normally be like 5-10 minutes of real time becomes 3 hours of you being immersed in that headspace and thinking about it a lot, which can be great, but it can also be exhausting. And you have to, again, pace yourself and set expectations for how much people are expected to do or how much they're expected to read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
do we want to wrap up with like I don't know.
Yeah, we can wrap
We got
up.
like
a
few minutes. Yeah.
We got 4 minutes. We can start wrapping up.
Yeah, and also
plug
the games you're writing that are play by post focused.
Yeah.
Well, if we are opening up the topic to it,
go for it.
I write games at havocfet.itch.io. And my most recent game, this is my final recording about being horrible scientists leaving audio logs behind as you get murdered by whatever terrible monsters you have unleashed, is designed to be played in play-by-post. To take advantage of the fact that play-by-post gaming gives you a written record of everything you have played. And that's available for $2 on havocfet.itch.io. The game is called This Is My Final Recording. And we have a final question. How do you all balance having private channels, conversations with players without excluding the rest of the party? From Hawkeye with many, many Ys. I cannot quite figure out how many Ys. Either 3 or 4?
4, 5. There's 5.
5. There we go.
So you do it, I think the simplest way, while we're summing it up in the last 2 minutes, is to make sure that you have an available private channel for every player. You don't leave anybody out. You just have everything laid out there very simply, so that if somebody has a private character question, they know where to do it. Make sure that this is a result of you having a strong structure in whatever format you have, whether it's forum, whether it's Discord, whether it's, and this is the old, people used to do this by email. So like, even if in your email you put in character or out of character, or like between two scenes, like just make sure that your structure and your infrastructure is in place and your characters understand how to approach you privately and personally, so that they can convey their thoughts and feelings.
Yes.
All right, well, we got 1 minute left. Jay, do you have anything to plug?
Yes, I am writing 2 different RPG systems that are probably relevant. One is called Notepad, that's still in development, which is focused on play-by-post focused mystery games. Ooh. And how to handle note-taking and deductive reasoning in a role-playing game. And the other one is called Bolt, which is a full-on heartbreaker game where everything one-shots you and you have to roll to not bleed out on the floor.
Joyous. Jay,
Me.
shoot it
Well,
off quick.
I'm currently developing a queer mafia RPG that's meant to be played over Play-By-Post
It's very
on
good.
Discord. It's what?
It's very good.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, so that's in development, and I officially got the go-ahead from my professor to actually work on this for school, so it will be happening, and I'm really excited.
Yay. Cool. Well,
Riley, anything to plug?
nope. And that'll be a wrap to our panel. Thank you.
All of us all on Twitter. We're all cool people.
We're all on
Yeah.
Twitter. We're all of you are cool. I'm decent.
No,
You're very cool.
You
Thank
are
you.
very
Hush.
cool.
Thanks, Abby. All right. Thank you, everybody
Abby,
who
thank you
came to
so
this
much.
panel. We
This
really
was wonderful.
appreciate it. Hit us up. Yeah.
Hit us
We'll
up
see
with
you in
any
half an
questions if
hour.
you need
Well, I'll be here
questions
for the
post-mortem.
next thing.
Yep. Cool.
I'll be on at 9 p.m. tonight
Hey,
There you go.
Hey.
peace out.
doing another panel.
Yeah,
Bye.
see ya.
Thank
It's been
you.
great
Bye,
talking with you all.
everybody.